Hi guys, how's it going? It's Amy here, Centre Director of New Me for Christ, bringing you this week's Life Word second video of the week as we look at heroes ? Today's passage is going to look at Judges chapters 6 through 8, and we're going to look together at the life of Gideon. What can we learn from his life about how God sees us and what God calls us to do as his followers? Now, when we first meet Gideon, God's people, the Israelites, have been oppressed and they're being bullied by two groups of people, the Midianites and the Amalekites. Gideon is hiding in a wine press, in a cellar essentially, doing a job he doesn't want the Midianites to know that he is doing. He's someone who's fearful about what others think. And as he's in this cellar, an angel of the Lord appears. And what's the angel of the Lord's first words to him? Hello, mighty warrior. Now, maybe God has a sense of humour, but I think there's something important about this. Gideon is terrified, and yet God addresses him as a mighty warrior. What might that mean for us? God sees our potential beyond our current circumstances. How does God see you when he looks at you? What would it take for you to start to see yourself the way that God sees you, his purposes for you? The angel says, hello, mighty warrior, even though Gideon has none of those characteristics at this moment. The conversation plays out, read it for yourself in Judges chapter 6. But what happens next is Gideon, through the night, decides to take down an Asherah pole that's been built. It's essentially a statue to worship a false god of the Midianites. Gideon feels challenged to do so, but he does so at night because he doesn't want anyone else to see him. Remember, this is a man who's afraid. He takes the Asherah pole down, and the next day everybody wakes up to find the statue dismantled. People come knocking at Gideon's door, but Gideon is saved because some people stand up and say, hey, if this fake God has an issue with it, he can deal with it himself. So Gideon continues to do what he's doing. Gideon, though, is someone that isn't just characterized as being afraid, he's also someone that needs reassurance. He enters into this dialogue with God. He says to God, hey, God, if you want me to do this next, if I'm to know your presence really with me, then here's my jumper. I'm going to lay my jumper outside. And what I need for you to do is make the jumper wet and the rest of the ground dry. When I wake up in the morning, then I'll know that you're with me. And as Gideon asks, so it happens. So the next day, Gideon says, hey God, just in case that was a fluke, do it the other way round. And that is what happens. Gideon takes confidence in this. God is with him. He's not afraid to challenge and wrestle and ask for reassurance. Are we as bold with God? Do we ask for confirmation, perhaps, of something that we think God has said? We can take confidence from the story of Gideon this day. God is gracious towards Gideon's requests. Then we have another amazing story that happens. See, Gideon decides, challenged by God, to go and lead God's people in a fight against the Midianites. Gideon rounds up a huge amount of men, but as they set out to battle, God intervenes. He says to Gideon, hey, Gideon, hold on. If this amount of Israelites can defeat the Midianites, the Israelites will think they did this in their own strength. I don't want them to think that. You're to whittle down the number of men. Now, from over 30,000, we get down to 10,000, and then through a couple of other things that happen, that number is whittled down to only 100 or so men. Gideon, of course, is terrified. How can he beat this mighty army with just 100 or so people? Gideon creeps towards the Midianite camp to hear what they are discussing in the enemy lines. He hears how the Midianites are terrified. He goes back to his camp, encouraged that God is with him and his small army. The next day they approach the camp, they shout, they make a lot of noise, the Midianites flee in terror, and Gideon, with only a tiny amount of men, defeat the Midianite army. Gideon becomes the mighty warrior God had called him back at the start of the story. Why? Because God saw Gideon's purpose and potential way before Gideon was ready to acknowledge it. But there's a warning for us at the end of Gideon's story, because it ends badly. Gideon goes back to his hometown, but he's full of his own ego. He builds a statue to his own memory, and we're told the favour of God passes from him because he's been caught up by things that he did in God's strength. He takes the glory as if it had just been him that had done it. What are we to learn from Gideon's story? Well, read the passage for yourself. There's lots of great details in here, but perhaps here's a couple of things to think about. How does God see you today? How is it an encouragement to us that God sees our potential beyond our current circumstances? What does God speak over your life? Are you going to choose to believe it this day? Secondly, I think there's something about asking God for reassurance. We can be bold in our requests to God. Gideon asked for reassurance. I'm going to put my jumper out 2 days in a row, asking God for something different. What do you need confirmation with today? Why not take it to the Lord and ask Him to speak clearly to you? Thirdly, where do we need to trust that God is with us, where you do things in His strength? Gideon can do the impossible because he follows God's instructions. Where do we need to listen to what God says more than what the world tells us if we want to see breakthrough and impossible things become possible? And lastly, where do we need to remember that it's God we serve, not our own ambitions or strengths? What do we need to give God glory for this day in order to be humble servants and followers of Him this day? Guys, read the passage for yourself. Why not hang out with Kwaku and I on Friday as we look at Life Words Unpacked and answer some more questions about these heroes that we're looking at this week. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye now.